Nancy, thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about the documentary? Just put it in your words.
The hard thing is just to talk a little bit about it because it's got a big part of my heart. It's an incredible story that I hardly knew about, which was World War II pilots that after they came back from fighting for the good old US of A, got involved in illegal operations, smuggling airplanes into Israel as it was just voted into statehood, and flying those planes and recruiting their buddies to fly in Israel's War of Independence.
You know, when I watched the film, my first reaction was, who knew? And I read in the Jerusalem Post that was your first reaction also.
Yeah, it just seemed incredible. It seemed really almost like a Keystone Cop farce. And the more I looked into it, the more crazy. I mean, I kept saying that it reminded me of Catch Me If You Can. The FBI and Treasury are hot on the tail of these guys, 2 steps behind, and Indiana Jones flying crappy planes, and Band of Brothers, because it was about these guys and finding their glory days again, too.
Yeah, absolutely. You were really under the gun time-wise.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
You know, any time that you're dealing with interviewees, subjects that are in their 90s, you don't have time to say, I'll do that tomorrow. You know, you really don't. You have to get on it right away. And I think my biggest regret is that I didn't even work on this film 10 years earlier because people were dying. We were losing our interviews. And we had no money, so I had to raise all the money, and we did it, you know, fundraising as a not-for-profit. And before we had money, we had to have the blind faith to go forward and start interviewing. We just couldn't wait till it was in the bank. And thankfully we did. Thankfully we did.
How did you find the story?
I actually found the story because somebody showed me the obituary for Al Schwimmer. And it was called The Father of the Israeli Air Force Dies, and it described an American and his whole story. And someone sent it to me and said, this should be your next movie. I wasn't even looking for a movie, you know.
Fantastic.
I just read it. You know, I get a lot of projects coming my way. And I went, oh my God, this has my name on it.
So can you talk about Al Schwimmer?
Al Schwimmer was an incredible guy, very camera shy, so we don't have a lot of him. And, you know, because he passed away, he's obviously not able to fill in the gaps with his story. Mm-hmm. Everybody told me that when he walked into a room, he commanded respect. And he was a quiet man, a TWA flight engineer. And he got involved. He wasn't really connected with his Jewish roots. He actually, I think he flew transport in World War II. And he saw a newsreel about the Holocaust. And whatever it did to him, it just lit him up, and he said, with Jewish pride. And he said, I need to do something to help these people. And he just was a smart guy, and he got in touch with David Ben-Gurion. And he said, you're not going to win this war if you don't have an Air Force. And that's what Ben-Gurion was also saying. And he oversaw it. He started to buy up surplus planes and call his buddies at TWA and recruit. One friend would call another friend and another friend, and that's sort of how they got it all together.
Unbelievable. And he was actually indicted for violating the U.S. Neutrality Act, and he lost his American citizenship.
Right.
He then stayed in Israel, founded Israel Aircraft Industries, and in 2001 he was pardoned by Clinton,
right.
I believe.
Right. And the thing is that what he did, not only did he lay the groundwork for Israel's Air Force, brought in Israel's heavy bombers, brought in the cargo planes that supplied the Negev, which was totally cut off when they were in the middle of the war, brought in, you know, just did all these incredible things. But he started Israel Aircraft Industries, which could still be Israel's largest industry. So he helped build the country economically also.
Incredible.
You know, so yeah, he's really a hero.
Incredible. You know, you mentioned Ben-Gurion before. He described the Mahalo Forces, and we'll talk about the Mahalo Forces a little bit later, as, quote unquote, the diaspora's most important contribution to the survival of the state of Israel, right. Unquote. Can you talk about the Mahalo Forces, what motivated them, who they were, what kind of conflicts they went through?
The Mahalo Forces were made up of many, many volunteers from many countries. There are about 4,000 altogether. This film in particular focuses on a handful of American pilots. First of all, pilots are sexier than the ground guys, so they got the movie. And I really wanted to tell an American story. I wanted to tell it from the American angle. American, makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. you know, for many reasons. They had their different motivations. Many of them were hit with a lot of anti-Semitism. They grew up being called all kinds of names. And then when they came back from the war, they couldn't get jobs. You know, the airlines would not hire a Jewish pilot. And they just had trouble. They were hit with it. And then they saw what was happening in Israel. And I think for that reason, for the anti-Semitism, for not finding their footing yet in the U.S., for missing their action days, their glory days, for feeling that it was part of their service, that they helped liberate the camps in Europe, and they see survivors coming into Israel and facing another potential genocide. And they thought their job isn't done. And they went. They just felt it was their duty.